Hey, we want to welcome you back. Thanks so much for joining us again. We're just going to continue the conversation we've been having. So where did we leave off again? We're talking about knowing that grace will lead us to reconciliation and taking a chance on that and risking that, and then being quick to repent. I'm going to jump in a little bit to some of the backstory because you had said what you'd said. So kind of from my side, I made the mistake of my relationship with your mother in sexually speaking. She told me, I kind of said, freaked out and said no, got real bad advice from my biological dad. And then kind of that's when the abandonment thing from my side began. And then, I'm trying to make sure I get that. And then somewhere in there, I forgot where, but I guess your stepfather, your mom's to-be husband, came and brought me some papers, and from what I understood from him, I was going to give up my parental rights. I was going to sign them over so that there would be an open path for adoption. So I kind of did that and took it as an exit, if you will, as an easy out into that. But then sometimes shortly after that is when in my own life, spiritually, is when I like to say I really was saved. Like you, I grew up in a Christian home, grew up in church, grew up, getting, doing the prayer as a little boy, and even, I would say maybe technically, if you will, born again or saved, but it wasn't really real, And especially getting into the teenage years and hormones go wild and you discover girls and all this other kind of stuff. And I was very much that hypocritical dual Christian, in the sense of, I would go do things and then I'd be at the altar on Sunday, normally Sunday night, not never Sunday morning, but always like Sunday night, and, be there, oh Lord, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again until next weekend, and then you're kind of back in all that kind of stuff. But around 19, I think, years old, it really, the proverbial penny dropped and my faith became real. And that's when I really think, and I really say that's when I was changed by what Jesus did. Because I remember that night in the altar when it became real, I stood up and it was different. There was a change. I don't know any other way to say it then. It was really real. It was really changed. I had new desires in my heart. And in that began the immediate desire of, oh man, there's Audra. But then I kind of, again, whether it was true or not, I don't know. I can't, because like I said, I signed papers and never read them. You know what I mean? So, but from what I remembered, it was like, now I'm stuck. Because I'd actually signed papers to not go and find you. And I remember having this internal struggle and then not knowing, again, saying what to do, still very much afraid and cowardly. But then as I grew in God, because then shortly after that, I went to Bible school, and that's where I met Selena. But from the very beginning, when I met Selena, I told her and said, hey, because we knew we wanted to get married, or we were at least moving in that direction. And so it was like date number 2 or 3. It was, and which I encourage you, if that's you, and you need to tell quickly, right? You don't hide things.
You don't want it to be the scenario like I thought.
Oh yeah.
And then all of a sudden somebody shows up.
Absolutely, and they're like, whoa, and
then that's a distrust in that relationship.
Absolutely.
And that has caused a lot of damage to people's lives.
Absolutely.
And it makes it harder for reconciliation not because of the person, but because of the person they trusted.
Absolutely.
And when that trust is broken. I don't want to say it's like an affair, but it's almost that same thing. Like, that's a pretty big piece of information to withhold.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not like you see on TV.
Yeah.
Things don't all. I'm serious.
Exactly right.
I've watched a lot of TV shows,
Yeah.
and you see that happen, and they're like, "Oh, it's all good," and you're like, "Okay, why bother? Like, it's all gonna work out." But it's not like what you see on TV.
Yeah. It's
actually probably going to be more like the story of Cinderella, like the evilness and it's never going to work out. And I don't want to say that disparagingly because Jesus can do a lot of things, but I'm just saying.
Oh, absolutely.
There are people involved in these situations.
Yeah. Well, and I think the point we learn from that is when we're, if you will, cleaning up our mistakes with the grace. I remember what Jesus said. I think it was around John chapter 3. He said that, people didn't come to him because they knew that their deeds were evil and they wanted to keep them in the dark. But if they came to him because he was the light of the world, their deeds would be seen as what they really were. And that's even now, once we come to faith in Christ, it's how do we clean up our mess in grace by keeping our deeds in the light.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Brene Brown. She writes a lot about vulnerability, and I've really been following her for a while. But she talks about, in anything, shame. Where's the root of shame?
Yeah.
And what's the other one? Vulnerability is what keeps people there.
Yeah.
Is secrecy.
Yeah.
And silence.
Yes.
And things left in secrecy and silence. Anything in your mind, I don't think you realize that we're very oriented as a people with stories.
Yeah.
And you've heard us kind of like, we're walking through our story, but you see, oh, I didn't know that part, or oh, I didn't know that was.
Yeah.
Because in a story in your mind, as a person, anything that happens with any kind of, especially anything emotional, really emotional, if there's a part of the story that's left out, and you fill it in with something, that's called a conspiracy. Like, if you look it up, that's what it means. Half truths, and you insert, and what are you doing? You're filling in the gaps of the story.
Yeah.
So with anything of that, so you have these conspiracies going on, and all these things that you think, and then you have silence. Like for me, like the silence of, what I had to come to, and I still have to come to. A lot of this comes down to how I view my worth as a person because of what happened to me, that I kept silent. And for many of you, if you're in my family and listen to this, you're probably like, wow, I never even knew that, because we never talked about it. And because of the shame and the things that come with it. And so when you, like I said, when you become a new believer, keep those things in the light. Because in Ephesians it says that all things are made manifest in the light.
Yes.
And that the Lord is going to uncover all of your deeds.
Yes.
And not for your shame, and that's what you need. And great, not for your shame, but to help you.
Absolutely.
To help you get better, to help you see the needs in your life, and to see where other people can meet them, and to see where God has already fulfilled them, and help you become the person He wants you to be. Yes. But all that, I think sometimes for me, like I've sat in church before, and we talked about this, and we've heard it recently. Yeah. I never came to you with this because I was so embarrassed, and I wanted to look good in front of you. Yeah. And totally. And we don't share our stories even in church. Where the people who need it are probably the people sitting right in your pews if you go to church. Yeah, absolutely. And we need to give, even with grace. Like, grace is awesome, but you don't want to take grace to the point of like never look back again. Yeah. And I struggled with that for a long time, even when I first met you. This whole idea of, well, now I should be like better. But I went to counseling for a year. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. And I went to them, honestly, very afraid of going to counseling because, well, that means that I'm not letting the grace of God take effect to my heart. Remember we talked about that. It wasn't that, no, you need to go so the grace of God can take effect. Because you need to go talk to somebody. Yes. That you don't have to see all the time, that knows things that can help walk you through all these things you've never dealt with, that you're not going to come to us for. Yeah, absolutely. And so there's no shame in that, but to realize that we need at church, the past is the past, and you can't change it, and all you can do is move forward, and God is a redeemer. Absolutely. But you have to deal with the things in your past. Absolutely. Because the things in your past, no matter what anybody tells you, can, if you don't deal with them, influence your future, and will come back to haunt you. Absolutely. For the rest of your life. I'm going to jump in real quick because recently you got to meet one of our mentors, and I liked when we had a little conversation like this with him, and I liked the analogy he gave. We're real quick. If I had broken my arm, and I'm limping around and not able to do something, and somebody said, well, what happened? Well, I fell down, I hurt my arm real bad, and I really can't use it. And they would say, go to the doctor. Go to the doctor. You probably broke your arm, and you need to get that. Yet many times we might be broken in our emotions, broken in our soul. Again, that part of the body that I think the Bible teaches, our mind, our will, our emotions. We might be broken in that way through something that's happened. But it's like we don't treat it the same way as if we had a broken arm. And that's what, that's why I'm glad you went to counseling. And I wanted to say that's what to encourage you. That's not a shameful thing. That's like we wouldn't look at you shamefully if you broke your arm. We actually would all say, hey, well, go get a neat cast and come back, we'll sign it. I mean, if there was some way we could put a
a cast on your heart while you're healing, you'd be surprised at how many people would sign that cast and say, hey, good job for getting that taken care of. And so I just wanted to say that because many times I think in Christian circles it can be a taboo subject to say, I went to counseling. Well, no, that's okay. That's a good thing. It's
I
healthy.
openly tell people when people will look at you, I mean, because I'm not embarrassed about it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'll say up to date, it's probably one of the best decisions I ever made.
That's cool.
Because I had gone in the past when I first met you.
Yeah.
Because even though it was good, remember we were talking about before, like it's when you meet somebody and you start this process and you let grace come in.
Yeah.
It can be overwhelming. Because
Yeah.
I remember when I first saw you on Facebook, the pictures and scrolling through, I had to run to my room and I'm not a big crier. I ran to my room and cried.
Yeah.
And like looked at everything and not because it wasn't good, because I just didn't know what to expect. All of a sudden, I had already kind of comforted myself with the knowledge I wasn't going to know you.
Yeah.
So I had already been like, I don't need a dad. It's time to move on.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be okay without one.
Yeah.
This is just my reality. And then all of a sudden, it was seriously not even 6 months later.
Wow.
Here you are on Facebook, and we start this. And it was overwhelming. And you can ask any of my friends when I was in college. I have very good friends. I made most of my forever friends in college. There was a time it was really hard.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to talk all the time. I did not sleep. I had the worst flu. I got so sick I thought I was going to die. Remember that on Valentine's Day, because I was so stressed emotionally. And I don't say that to poo-poo meeting people. I mean, I'm just saying that's just, even in all of its goodness, there is a stress that comes with that. And I started going to counseling all the way up through that semester in school, and I could pay for it back then because that's all I could afford, because it was free until school was out and I had to wait. But I went for a while, and just went to her and just sat in my chair and said, "Let me tell you what just happened to me."
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was like, "Whoa, yeah, we need to talk."
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Just to remember that, like in all of this, even in this good moment, sometimes emotions, especially if you're anything like me and you're not overly, this whole journey for me has been, I found my emotions in all of this, which is kind of a weird place to find your emotions, and I'm still wrestling with them. But it can be overwhelming. I know it was for you, because he had he had all the kids, and he had my stepmom, and he was a pastor, and we're staying up on the phone till 4 o'clock in the morning because we're so excited. Yeah. And you are so excited. Yeah. And in that, I was telling Dad, I think some of our biggest blunders that tripped us up later that we had to just forgive each other for happened in those first 3 months, because then when reality set back in, and we couldn't talk as much. For me, it triggered a bunch of other things, and well, you can't expect us to talk to you all the time. You can't expect us to be, you can't, and all of a sudden, but you were before, and I'm so excited, and I thought you wanted me to be around, and you have to be and that's where you just have to, we talked about this, grace really helped us then, because we had to go back and go, we really screwed up at first, and we pushed each other, like we were talking about the last one. We pushed each other to be like each other, and we were just shoving our ideas down each other's throat all the time, and we were almost in some ways smothering each other, and we really had to all take a step back and go, we need to bring this into some balance. We couldn't have done that without grace.
That's a good point.
To go, not because, and as I said, not because it wasn't a good thing, because why does anybody, even in church, when you hear people, and they learn something that God shows them, and they can take it and swing it so far out, and it gets so weird, you do that out of enthusiasm. You don't even mean to.
Absolutely.
And our lives are not secluded. So in anything that goes on, so even situations like this, in our enthusiasm, we pushed each other, and and expectations got really high on both sides. And we had to watch all that go back to equilibrium. Yeah.
Well, it's good because, because like what Audra's saying, when we first were meeting and talking, it was long late night sessions. There was a 2-hour time difference. My wife and I at that time lived on the West Coast, and she was still here in Alabama in the central time zone in the U.S. And so there was a time zone difference, and there was all this other kind of stuff. So allow grace to lead you to sustainability. And I think that's a good thought to take away from that point is that grace will keep us in a sustainable place. It'll keep us it'll bring us to a place where things will continue and can flourish. I even like what you said. That's a great thought even on a doctrinal side or a church side. That in enthusiasm we learn something and start something new, and we can push it to a non-sustainable teaching, if you will, or anything, because of enthusiasm. But grace will always bring us back to sustainable.
It'll always lead you back to a place where you can live.
Yes.
Because grace is the motivator of our lives. I mean, everything about God is grace.
Absolutely.
And that's His love. Everything, love, His faith, whatever it all goes back to. We don't deserve it.
Yes.
And He gave it to us.
Absolutely.
And we can live, and we live our whole lives out of that. But I mean, even for that, let's take this, getting us back to our questions.
Sure.
But, even for that, because when we came face to face with all this was probably that first summer I came up.
Yeah.
Kind of, I don't know if you want me to get into that.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
I mean,
we're just flowing and going.
We're flowing and going.
We got no real.
We're big ad-libbers anyway,
Yeah,
so this
are.
is a big ad-lib experience.
So if somebody said that, if you're listening, watching, or whatever, if we interrupt each other, if we make humor that you might go, oh my gosh, I mean, that's normal. We're all good because we're kind of weird that way.
Yeah.
But
so I mean, I went up there and I wasn't going to because actually I was talking to my grandmother the other day, Dad's mom, we call her Nana the other day, about that first summer I was supposed to go to Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
I don't know if you even remember that. I was eligible and I was in the top 10 to go get this really cool internship, which is something I really wanted. I really wanted to do. But I was struggling because we were struggling with the communication side, and we were getting to this place where, we need to just have some time to spend with each other.
Yeah.
And so, but I wasn't going to give up this internship because this was a really big deal. And so I joke around and say that kind of God made it possible that I made it to the top 10 and was not selected. They only picked like 3.
Yeah.
And so it was a great honor even to make it that far, but it kind of opened the door where we made this choice. I just need to come up for the summer.
Yeah.
And we'd only met in February.
Yeah.
We started talking in January, and I came up in May when school got out for the summer.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of people. I had people support me, but I had a lot of people that were very like, "You are crazy. You're going 3,000 miles away to live with people you don't know. You've only talked to on Skype and the phone and email and and you're going to do this." And that was talking about grace and stepping out in faith. Like, because I believed that what I had seen was true.
Yeah. Very good.
And so that's kind of what I was going on is,
that's cool.
You know what? But here's how I'll know.
Yeah.
If this is not just us talking on the phone, I can go.
Yeah.
And I felt great peace about it.
That's cool.
And it had to happen. And just all kind of happened that way. And so when we get up there, though, is when we realized, and this is something maybe we need to segue into, is another thing we realize is there's only so much you can talk about on the phone, via email, Skype. But you have to be really intentional.
Yes.
And so that first summer, it was just an intentionality thing. I need to come be there and be around and see what is going on.
Absolutely.
And so and that was another thing. It was a very hard summer for me. I mean, it was wonderful. It was horrible all in this one.
Big ball.
I mean, I hope you hear my heart in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mad,
Totally. No.
Now I'm feeling all guilty. But but it's just all these different emotions because it just it was challenging.
Yes.
It was tough. It shattered my perceptions. I met my stepmom and the children for the first time and kind of got thrown into their life after being on my own for so long. Yeah. And it rocked my world, but we had to have that, and we had to come even later when I went back to school, which was hard, finished, worked a little bit, and came back again for that 6 months. Yeah. As before we transitioned back here, that was a hard time because we had been apart again for a year and a half, and we realized, wow, proximity really matters.
Absolutely.
So at some point in reconciliation, in meeting each other, we understood that we had to live within proximity.
Yes.
For at least
a season.
A season.
Yes.
Or was not going to survive. And even though that's for true in anything, because I'm about to move away again. Yeah. And I've had to come it's been a little scary just to go oh no, I don't want it to end up being like it was. And then come back. But you have to just recognize everything changes, and that's what grace helps you change.
Absolutely.
It helps you make it through those changes. Yeah. In the sense of, but you have to have that time together.
Yes.
where you're actually rubbing elbows and seeing
Absolutely.
each other and eating
Absolutely.
meals and can go places, and it's not, even if it's like they live 3 hours away or the person lives a plane ride away. Okay, well, we need to schedule times. We need to save
Yes.
money. We need to look for cheap tickets.
Absolutely.
We need to just be as intentional as you can.
To be, well, I
Yeah.
like to say, like, because it's a good analogy here. Maybe it's what I tell young couples, young people that are doing the internet dating thing. Okay, you found somebody online. We found each other on Facebook. So if you know anybody that knows Facebook, we'd love to get on. We think there's some money in there for it. No, I'm just kidding. But you find somebody on the internet. You build what you say, which is you start a relationship, but you really haven't begun relating until you're in the same zip code, until you can sit, elbow to elbow, knee to knee, nose to nose. You can look at somebody because you can see body language, you can hear them, know, and there's a dynamic of relating that has to be physical, touchable, tangible, like this. You have to be there, 3D. And so I love that's a great, so if you're at a place where maybe you and this person that Grace is leading you to reconcile with are at a distance with each other, you're going to have to be intentional about being with each other as you move forward in this process so that you can fully and truly communicate with each other. Because, as awesome as Skype is and all the great technology that we have, nothing beats real life, ever.
Yeah, because everything kind of changed when we met in person, and it's kind of the same way as they realized, I was probably a lot different than how they imagined me to be when we met. I can't speak for that. Y'all were.
Yeah, absolutely.
People get off of their pedestal. It's true anything online. You can be anybody online.
Yeah.
You can present, not that you're lying, but you just can't, because you can't express everything.
Absolutely.
So you meet somebody in a real life setting.
Yes.
And there can be disappointment.
Yeah.
And people get knocked off their pedestals.
Yes.
And you see things like the ugly truths face to face. Like, man, he was short with me, or this person did that, or why did he get mad about that? I didn't even do anything, or and then personality rubs, and then you learn people's actual personality where you can see them. And the same thing with me. And they, I never thought, and even realize that even though you're talking and sharing all this information, that you're not going to remember everything. That was a big deal for me. Is I have I think a godly gift of memory, because I actually do remember most everything. Yeah. You don't.
No.
And so for a while it was really frustrating because, I told you that when we talked. Don't you remember this time that we talked? And I told you, and this happens now. We live in the same house.
I've slept since then.
Don't you remember that? And you can't take it personal.
Yes, absolutely.
You might have to repeat yourself.
You will have to repeat yourself. Yeah.
You'll have to repeat yourself, and you'll have to not get mad and don't think like I did for a while. Well, that's because
you don't care.
You don't care. It's not important to you. No. You just, like I said, grace helps you get past all. And it's not foolproof, because you're going to mess up, and then grace will help you make up.
Again, believe it or not, we're coming to the end where we need to stop this session. That went by really fast, but some things that I think we've talked about here that are good, again, and kind of takeaways in this is the idea. I liked what you said earlier, that grace will help you dare to see the truth of what's there, what's possible. Yeah. You said that earlier in this conversation, that you came to Canada, you came and lived with us those times because, man, you were seeing something and you liked what you saw, and you were beginning to believe that, wow, this could really happen. And grace does that to us. It inspires us to believe the best, to dare to believe bigger than we imagined. Even the idea that the prophet Isaiah in the Bible says, who's going to believe the report I'm bringing in this prophecy, that God's going to love us so much that He's going to die for us. He's going to do it for us, and it's going to be complete and total, and He's going to take away our sin. He's going to give us healing and provision. Who's gonna, and that's my paraphrase, who's gonna believe this report? But that's grace. It helps you to kind of really go, wow, this sounds too good to be true. But man, grace will give me the hope to think, but man, it's true. Now, but then it also, on the journey to good, how do we say that? On the journey to good, on the journey to too good to be true. You know, I don't know if that's my English major
really
daughter
funny.
over here.
I'm enjoying you but it's really good. It was just funny.
She's an English major, by the I love it. She's an English major. She goes, Dad, you misspelled that again, or Dad, you. It doesn't go like that, Dad. And so, but on this journey to too good to be true, we're going to run into a lot of chances for disappointment, chances to, like what you said, hard, man. Oh, when I'm face to face and I'm in that time, and whoa, okay. Here's an ugly bit. Grace helps us to chip away the ugly bits. It helps us to talk, because again, we have to talk about it. And even still now, and even I'm sure in this process as we're talking with you all, and we'll walk away and go, man, well, what about, and it's going to help us to talk, because grace is constant. And we said it earlier, I think, in this recording, grace is constantly bringing the loving light of Jesus and what he did into our life so that we can clean up the messes that we've made. And so that through his, and he shines it in there, and I love to use it not for our shame, but so that we can go, wow, okay, let's deal with this. Let's talk this out. Let's look at this, and please forgive me, or please do this, or hey, okay, wow, okay, does that make sense? So I'm excited. Real quick, anything else you want to add?
I guess I'm not going to say too much because I know we're going to have to stop and start again. So I'm just going to hold all my comments.
Oh, you're going to hold your own? Okay, good. Hold on. Well, let's do this.
Thank you for listening this whole time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
We really do. So we'd love to have this conversation beyond this recording. So again, the ways you can get a hold of us, you can email me at brad.holloman@gmail.com. You can email Audra at
audragkennedy@gmail.com.
And then online, you can check this out at, again, or talk with us at graceanswers.tv or thehollomans.com. And you spell our last name HOLLIMANS, thehollomans.com. And again, as I said, thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you again.